Hi, Dan. It's Jerry Bogas. How are you? Can you unmute Dan?
Yes. Hang on, Dan. There we go.
Can you hear us, Dan? Dan, can you hear us?
He's muted.
He's still muted.
Oh, okay. He's okay now.
Oh, he's unmuted now. Oh, he muted himself.
No, wait. Now, okay. Hello.
Hey, how are you,
Hi.
Dan? How are you?
Seems I have a personal audience here.
Yes, right. It's a great ratio. You and 8 people, right?
Oh, let me bend your ear. Yeah.
No, that's fine. And actually, what I was going to suggest is there's a lot of stuff here. We're assuming no one else is going to be joining at this point, although we don't know that. But there's a lot of stuff here that you already know, so we don't have to provide you any context. So we were just going to move on into some of the polling, and or you could just talk to us actually for
Okay.
these questions that we have. Okay.
Sure.
So let's see. Why don't we advance the slides,
Mhm.
Stephanie?
Right. Just so you know, Dan, we do offer AICP credits at the end of this workshop. Just so you know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If you want them. So keep going.
Yep.
All right. So the purpose here, we're going to skip the introduction because we know you know what NYMTC is, and what we do from 40 years ago, among other things.
Yeah, time flies.
So we're putting together the next regional transportation plan.
Yep.
There's a draft framework that the members have defined and vision goals and so forth.
Yep.
And we keep going. We need to put together a pedestrian and bicycle element as a special element to the plan, as you probably recall back from the 90s. Keep going, Stephanie. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. This is one of 6 different topical forums that we're offering.
Yep.
I don't think we'll need to use poll everywhere at this point, so let's keep going. We know where you're from, so you don't need to.
This for some reason showed up from the last meeting.
Yeah, I know. Keep going.
I cleared it. It was just strange. Okay.
Oh,
There we go.
We know who you're representing, so keep going.
Yeah. Okie dokie.
Okay, one more.
Oops. Clear those.
So actually, you could just talk to us on this one, Dan. This was the icebreaker question that we usually started with, which is, top of mind concerns as you're coming into this. What do you want us to know about ideas, concerns that are top of mind related to the topic that we're doing today?
Basically, we need a connected cycling and walking network.
Okay.
Comprehensive network. Prioritize like downtowns and schools, and also transit connectivity, which is kind of being worked on, but needs to be fully fleshed out and implemented. Because the bike walking transit combination is really tremendous, and we need to maximize that as much as possible. We just have so many disjointed sidewalks. You're walking along and it just ends, and then you're like, walking in the street, and that's not acceptable. We have all the state roads out here in Westchester and all over the place in Long Island. You're walking and there's no sidewalk, and you're going with 45 miles an hour traffic, and it's not the drill.
Right. No, particularly in the suburbs, that's a huge issue for walking and certainly for cycling. So, okay. That's a good top of mind concern. That's great. So let's keep going because we're going to get into some specifics here. So one of the things we're doing, and we can go to the next one here, is that, and I'm not sure we're going to ask you this, but we're converting the pedestrian and bicycle element into an active transportation element.
Sure.
And there are particular reasons why. When you think of active transportation, and I'm sure you think of it a lot, what comes to mind for you for the term active transportation? I mean, you just described some of it with the system.
Mainly walking and cycling, but I see I had a separate session about disabled access, healthcare access, and things like that. But I don't know who here has traveled to the Netherlands, but it's mind-blowing how, since so much focus has gone into wheeled cycling access, that leads into major access for people in wheelchairs and, or mobility scooters, etc.
Right. Right.
And it's very sad around here, very rare to see someone out on their own, getting around in a mobility scooter. We live in, in a town that has plenty of disabled people, and we have a senior residence downtown. We have a senior residence, outside of near Phelps Hospital.
Right.
You don't see people getting around that way, and it's because the sidewalks are a mess, the curb ramps are a mess. Just general building storefront access is a problem. So it's, that ties into active transportation for me, and also just for social justice and, access for disabled folks.
So
Okay.
you in Tarrytown or Sleepy Hollow?
I'm in Sleepy Hollow, but I
Oh, you
mean,
are?
they're
Okay.
basically one place,
Right. No, I know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know that. And so there's a Kendall
Yes,
resident.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Got
Oh,
it.
you're sharp.
So let's keep going because, we would normally go through this and talk about the significance of active transportation and the
Mhm.
challenges and the opportunities. And we would start to get people involved in this by asking them about their favorite place to walk and bike. But
Right.
I think you've already, touched on that, and you're at a different level of knowledge than most people who attend these things. We also talked about the cycling census.
Oh, yeah,
and,
yeah. They did a nice job with that.
right, and the barriers to hold on one second, Stephanie. The barriers to active transportation, and then some of the rankings that were provided by the respondents. And so, there's a growing knowledge of what people face. And I guess you could extend this to mobility scooters and anything else.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, let's go forward too. And one more. And of course, the safety issues of
Yep,
pedestrians and for cyclists and anybody else. One more. And the planning challenges, lack of data. The cycling census is the most complete database, but it's not a scientific sample. It's
Sure.
but still, it's
Something.
the only thing out there, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about network connectivity and so forth, we have very spotty information on volumes. It's very difficult to collect volumes.
Yeah.
So there's definite gaps on the planning side with what we know about cycling. And I guess the cycling community has been the source of most of the information that's out there. Next slide. So we are pursuing a number of strategic pillars for this new active transportation element. See them here, and we're going to touch on all of them with you, but we'll skip through it relatively quickly because,
Sure.
again, you don't need the contextual stuff. So let's go to the first one. You already mentioned the significant projects, the connectivity, the system, the need for a system. We would
So you got
normally talk
the
about some of the major
Tarrytown
projects.
connector there.
Sorry again?
See the drawing there of the Tarrytown connector for the
Right.
Riverwalk?
Right. So now moving on to the next. What would you consider, and again, you can just say this, you don't have to
Yeah.
put it into the poll, but what's the most important existing piece of active transportation infrastructure in your area? Would it be the, say, the Hudson River Valley Greenway or something else?
Yeah, well, the North-South County Trail, Empire State Trail,
Right.
whatever, however you want to label it.
Right. Okay.
I mean, of existing piece of infrastructure, that is, but it's treated by the county and most people as a recreational facility.
Right.
It's not maintained in winter, and there's some accessibility issues with it as far as the way they have the gates managed, but it could be, and it is a bike highway, and for a lot of people,
Right.
and it's, we need to try to help, build connectivity to it.
Right.
So,
Got it. So, but moving on from existing, I think the next one, Stephanie, is. Where is the greatest need for the infrastructure?
Yeah.
What do you consider the most
Well, right
important project?
here, you know, in general, is the Route 9 project, which the DOT has picked up,
Right,
which is great. And Greenberg is put in for the Route 119,
Oops.
advancing that project,
right,
which is great. And you know, the Tappan Zee Bridge, you know, I'll call it that, needs to have the path open 24/7, 365 in all weather. It's closed overnight. It's closed in bad weather. It's closed in windy weather. You know, whatever. It's being operated by the Thruway Authority as a recreation facility. It needs to be treated as a transportation facility as part of the National Transportation Network.
that's interesting. Okay,
And the same with all of the bridge crossings. I mean, now the GW Bridge is closed overnight lately, as far as I've heard. And you know, all of the bridges in the Hudson Valley need to be treated that way. You know, the city bridges, they're open all the time. This is not a problem. They
Right.
have the program to maintain it in the snow and ice, and it's, you know, an important resource. So
right. What,
um,
how do you feel
so
about the
that's
connections to the Tappan Zee / Cuomo Bridge on the Westchester side?
what connections?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's why I asked.
exactly. So I mean, that's what the Route 9 and Route 119 projects are, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Because the Nyack side, you know, there's some stuff there. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more local streets.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to get around a little better over there. But once you get out at Nyack, it's, you know, it's rough. So
Yep.
and
Got
then
it.
you guys have a project working on that, which is marvelous. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that came out of the cycling community actually. So
Yep.
we just took it on. So, all right, let's go on to the next. So the other, the second pillar is complete streets and transit connectivity. You mentioned transit before, and you certainly know what complete streets are, but let's move on to the question. And keep going. These are just strategies. More strategies. Okay. What do you consider to be the biggest barrier? And again, you don't have to answer the poll, just in terms of complete streets, particularly, and you're in a unique situation because you're in Westchester. And there are barriers, and there were barriers to Route 9 before it started, so
Yep.
what's your thoughts on what the biggest barriers are?
It's like there's so many interconnected barriers. It's not
Right,
it's not necessarily one thing. You know, it would be, for a while there was the federal funding for like Safe Routes to School was 100% federal funded.
right.
That was nice. And making it easier to apply for those funds, I've heard, it's a hassle to do federal funding project.
It is.
But you know, I haven't personally dealt with that. Um, I think politically we're making headway here in Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown. Um, you know, just in general though, for creating a regional network, it's, you know, political will is a huge part of it. Um, and but then part of the political will is also the Department of Transportation. Their mindset is still very 20th century and very level of service for motor vehicles oriented.
All right.
And it's very difficult to move them off of that mindset. I've worked directly with them on that. I've, you know, talked to them a bit about it, and hopefully this Route 9 project will move them a bit in the right direction. They, you know, there's definitely some energy going that way, but there's still, I sense, you know, from various conversations now, but you know, in the past leading up to this project, that there's still resistance. Um, so, you know, just traffic engineering in general needs
Were there
an
were there
overhaul.
were there any lessons learned from your perspective from what happened with 9?
Well, we're still at the beginning of this process, basically.
Yeah,
So we'll see at the end of the process where we end up.
but you got to the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was,
Hmm.
it was political.
Yeah,
Basically, there was grassroots bugging the villages and the villages bugging the elected officials here. And we have Andrew Stewart Cousins here, which really got that over the hump.
right.
So the DOT was hemming and hawing, but Andrew's like, look, we got to do this. How much money do you need? We'll make it happen. And they were like, okay, fine.
Yep.
So, and just, the DOT will claim poverty, but then, they just expanded the 287-95 interchange to nowhere. Like, what is that doing for anybody? Just tons of projects like that I could rattle off. Just their priorities are motor vehicle expansion. We need to back off all that funding and pour it into active transportation, into transit, active transportation connectivity. So it's really just, I think probably the biggest barrier is where we're spending our money.
Mhm.
Is where are the federal funds and the state funds going to? And it's all, the vast majority of it is still going into, motor vehicle capacity.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. Let's keep going. Okay, we've been joined by Martin Buckman.
Hello.
Hello, Martin. Stephanie, you might as well unmute Martin also, since we're now doing this verbally. By the way, Dan, just so you know, we did have an earlier session this afternoon on this.
Yep.
And it was pretty well
How'd that go?
attended, right? No, it's pretty well attended, and so
Good.
we're gathering a lot of information. We don't usually have interviews like this, but
Yeah.
you never know with the evening session. Sometimes you pull in a lot of people, sometimes you don't. So we just thought it would
Dan is here as well, our speaker from the afternoon.
Yes, Dan Sirachi. We just thought it's
Hi,
good
Dan.
to give people the opportunity. You probably know Dan, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know Dan.
Dan Party.
So, Mr. Buckman, we're going through this verbally rather than, since it's a small number of people this evening.
Okay, great. I'm a board member of the New York Bicycle Coalition, so I guess that would be my purpose here.
Good. Welcome, and happy that you're here. One of the things we've been talking about, Mr. Buckman, is that we've been talking about how to make transit and active transportation work better together. And we're up to this point in the presentation where we're talking about accessibility to the nearest transit stop or station. I know Dan Convisor is in Westchester. Mr. Buckman, are you in the suburban counties or are you in New York City?
I live in Port Jefferson, which is about 60 miles east of New York City.
Right. Okay. Know it well. So these are similar questions for you too, in terms of the suburban perspective of how accessible is your nearest transit stop on foot or on bike? And, is it a matter of, if it's not accessible, is it a matter of distance, or is it a matter of there's no place to put the bicycle when you go there, or, what are the factors there? So any thoughts from either of you on that?
Yeah, I mean, Port Jefferson is a main hub, and there is two different bike trails, the North Shore Rail Trail and the Topical Greenway. So, and there are sidewalks, so the accessibility is not bad. I would never leave my bicycle at that station for an extended period, safety-wise, without some sort of, bike locker or bicycle hanger or something to that effect.
Right. Now, isn't there a topography issue also in Port Jeff?
It depends on, is topography a euphemism for hills?
Yeah, the huge hill is what I was referring to.
Yeah, coming up from downtown, you better have eaten your Wheaties in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard, but The problem with 25, like Main Street coming out of downtown, is that hill has no shoulder.
Right.
So you would have to take side roads. So yeah, from the downtown area, it's a hill, but that I didn't think that there's anything you can do about a hill.
Well, no, I mean, there is, but we wouldn't do it. So, um, Dan Converser, if you want to talk a little bit about how this plays out where you are in terms of access to transit. Are you muted, Dan? You are muted, Dan. I don't know how that happened. Stephanie, can you unmute?
He's
Dan?
not, oh, he was unmuted and
There we go.
now.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There was some noise in the background here, so I muted to not hear that, but then I couldn't unmute. So sorry about that.
No problem.
I mean, as far as transit access here, we have 2 train stations that have sidewalks mostly going to them. They're not 100%. The Tarrytown station is pretty good. The Phillips Manor station is mixed. So, and cycling wise, it's, you can bike there. Though, it depends on your comfort level of cycling with motor vehicles, but it's
Right.
mainly local streets, so it's not too bad. Hills are a challenge for some.
Yeah.
E-bikes are a help with that, but then we also do have all the Beeline buses have bike racks, which is great. It's been very helpful. So for the folks who can lift their bikes onto them. So
Right. So at those stations, are there facilities to either lock the bike or at least park it?
Yeah, Tarrytown has a good number of racks. Hopefully someday they'll put in some lockers for folks who have expensive e-bikes or whatever. The Phillips Manor station, back when I was commuting to the city, the one rack that was there was very full. So I was like, I could either lobby the village and the MTA, or I could just spend $300 and buy another bike rack. So I did that.
Okay.
And then it turns out the first rack that was there was installed on a volunteer basis also, I found out. So yeah, there's enough parking at Phillips Manor. So
Okay. So with the advent, you may know this, Dan, with the advent of electric bikes and so forth and e-mobility, are there any instances that you're aware of where, chargers are being provided at stations for e-bikes?
I have not heard or seen of such, though that would be helpful.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I thought maybe you might know.
And especially in places like Port Jeff or here where it's where you do have hills.
Right.
So it's like having the ability for e-bikes to bike across the Tappan Zee or come from further away from Tarrytown and be able to park and charge during the day, that I think that would have a value.
Okay. Very good. Stephanie, let's move on to the next. Micromobility. Okay, so I'm assuming you both have a good sense of what micromobility is and
Yep.
how it's being expressed. So we're not going to go through the context here.
Right.
But when you think of micromobility, what do you most think of? Is there something that most comes to mind when you think of micromobility?
Sure. Something that is portable beyond when you get to your destination, be it a foldable bike, be it a scooter, be it a some sort of scooters and foldable bikes, I would guess. But there are now I've seen electric powered unicycles. I've seen all kinds of things, but electric skateboards. But
Right.
to me, the definition would be something that when you get to your office or your destination or the train, you put it under your arm and you go in. So you're
Right.
not leaving it at the station.
You're essentially taking it with you, right?
Right. My foldable bike would qualify as a heavier version of that, but it is. Yeah.
Did the battery? you know, for electric technology, would the weight of the batteries work against that?
For what? For
Well, say you had,
foldable?
yeah, you had a foldable e-bike.
No. Oh, my foldable is the standard. It's
Right.
not an e-bike. So an e-bike foldable would be prohibitively heavy to
Heavy,
be.
yeah.
It would be probably 40 or 50 pounds because
Yep.
my regular is 25. So
So you're doubling, right?
yeah. So what was your specific question about the micromobility?
Well, just what comes to mind when you think
Oh.
about it. And again, this was more for a general audience too. So, but
Yeah.
it's instructive to hear you guys too. You know something about this. Dan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, bikes can be micromobility or not, it depends, but I think of mostly scooters.
Okay.
Though, I heard a discussion, just like semantic discussion of like what is the right word, for micromobility and active transportation and something like that. And they're suggesting like to flip the whole scale of it and be like human scale mobility versus like machine scale mobility or something like that. I forget what they were using for motor vehicles. It's like, because it's, motor vehicles are just like so much larger and problematic and but whatever. I don't
Yeah.
need to get too semantic on you guys. So,
No, I know what you mean though, because when we
Yeah.
talk about it, it's like, well, what do you call these things? They're not
Yeah.
modes, we call them conveyances actually,
yeah,
which is a clumsy term, but you're right. They're not motor vehicles, but they're not, non-motorized either.
yeah.
They're semi-motorized.
I think the biggest thing I would think for something like one of those stand-up scooters or a skateboard or anything that's micromobility is they're vulnerable road users like bicycles, and that they would really need the same infrastructure that any vulnerable road user would need.
Right.
And just kind of a taking together the increasing number of electric scooters, electric bikes, and all these other uh like powered unicycles. They can go really fast, all these
They
guys.
can.
And it's I'm trying to think how to put this all together, sorry. In major corridors like the Manhattan Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge, and Queensboro Bridge, it's like, or even on the avenues in Manhattan, or even out here, it's like we need to have like separation of these different modes. It's like on the North County Trail, there's issues with like you're walking and you're biking. It's like ideally there'd be a walking, section, or walking pavement, and then a cycling pavement. But now you get into with these other increased power and speed. And I think in New York City, we really need to move in this direction, is that there needs to be, the sidewalk area, there needs to be the regular bike area, and then there needs to be like high powered micromobility area, and then there needs to be the cars and trucks and buses.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well,
It's interesting though, we're going to have a whole session in May on micromobility, only on micromobility.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the types of conflicts you're talking about that are increasingly arising, not only between motor vehicles and these conveyances, but also between these conveyances and other conveyances,
Yeah,
and pedestrians, and that type of thing. So
Yeah, 'cause
we'll really dig into it in that session in May.
yeah, because it's really tight. The Queensboro Bridge is a mess right now.
Yeah.
And even if they do add another road deck, it's still gonna be tight. And then, the Manhattan Bridge is tight. It's we need to pop out one more lane for motor vehicles and make that like the high speed, small scale vehicle, mopeds, whatever it is.
Right.
Because they can't really go with the motor vehicle, with the trucks and the cars, but they can't really go with the people walking and biking. And technically the walking and the biking really should be separate also, because it's like, if there's a great cartoon of some Dutch person or whatever made, it's like there's a swimming pool, people swimming laps, but then you have someone fishing and someone rowing a boat, and it's like, no,
Right.
it's they're different, so
That's a
it,
good point.
yeah.
Well, we would encourage you to come back for the session on this, because Dan Sirachi, who's listening in, is going to dig into the issues around micromobility and how to
Yeah.
maybe talk about these things. Stephanie, let's move on to the next, please. You can keep going. And keep going. And I think we can keep going from here too. So, we would assume. Well, let me ask the question actually, because you've both been involved in non-motorized transportation, pedestrian and bicycles, but now we're moving into this semi-motorized world of micromobility. How do you feel about that? And are you, is it something that you see as a positive development, not a positive development, something else? Any
I
thoughts
think
on
it's
that?
important, the less giant metal boxes we have going around on our streets, the better,
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I think though that it's created quite an excuse for people to be against micromobility or infrastructure, because they see delivery people, they see teenagers on skateboards and scooters, and they lump bicycles all with that, and they'll say, oh yeah, the real traffic hazard in New York City is crossing the bike lane, or that, oh, there's all these people going up the wrong way and things like that. So I think what the other Dan was saying is that the ultimate goal is to have a separate lane for them and a separate lane for bike. I think bikes and pedestrians can sort of share, but I think the micromobility pirates sort of give everything a negative connotation. So yeah, so but also what the other Dan said, I love that quote, anything that gets people out of these big metal boxes, whether they be cars or even mass transit. Like one time I was sitting on the West Side Highway and I was watching rush hour on that, in Riverside Park on that bike path. And the rush hour on the bike path was as busy as the West Side Highway. And I just thought how miraculous that was, that every single person on those bikes is one less car and one less person in them crowding the mass transit. So, but right now, I think the micromobility people, the electric scooters, electric skateboards, and of course e-bikes, they tend to be kind of piratey. They tend to think that the rules don't apply to them, and that gives everything else, casts a shadow on everything else.
Okay. Thank you for that.
yeah, I mean, I think part of the fly by night or catch as catch can attitude is just because the infrastructure is really not set up for this situation. It's all 90%
Right.
of the 90% of the space is all like trying to move cars and trucks, and so it's, and signals are, and just need to try to rearrange things a bit, and so it's not like you need to integrate them into the system so everyone understands where you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to behave, and make I think I kind of took this from someone else, but it's like we need to make the safe thing to do be the easiest thing to do.
Yep.
And so we need to design the system so everybody understands how to behave, because the system shows you how to behave.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to use that in my next presentation. I don't know who's saying
Absolutely.
that. Okay,
I
thanks.
ripped it off from someone else.
Do you get royalties for that? All right, that's excellent. I think we've covered this one, Stephanie. We can move on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dan just texted. That's also a good one. I'll credit him. Correct design invites correct usage. So,
Just so you know, we're not ignoring Dan Sirachi, but he's our subject matter expert, so he's just listening in
okay.
for the evening.
At some point, I'm glad to do this, but at some point I need like 5 minutes to talk about a specific project? Is that going to be?
Yeah, let's do that because we did have a top of mind thing before you came on. And
Oh.
let's do that now. So,
Go for it.
go
Okay,
for
Do
it.
you want me to go back to that slide, Jerry?
No, that's fine. We can just listen.
Okay, so I sort of represent two different projects that I've been working on for a couple of years. And I'm really at a stall point as to how to move these things forward. One is called the Great South Bay Greenway. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so it was proposed by the Suffolk County Economic Development Office and by Steve Ballone, the county executive. And it was endorsed by Senator Kennedy from Buffalo as the Transportation Department. And then I personally went and got endorsement letters from Senator Alexis Week, from Senator Martinez, and from Assemblyman Durso, whose districts would be affected by it, only to find that DOT said that because it would flog the evacuation lane, it's an impossibility. So I'd like to speak to that just for a minute.
Sure.
The evacuation lane in the plan that was proposed by the Economic Development Office will be convertible, and it will be enabled in terms of a storm to be used as an evacuation. The model is that on the Wantaw Parkway with the bike path there, they took away a lane, a northbound lane, to create a buffer. So if they could do it there, they could do it in Suffolk County. When we're talking about that every person in a bicycle is one less person in a car, the amount of traffic that crowds the Robert Moses Causeway on a nice Saturday or Sunday in the summer would be greatly reduced. The people who work there, the teenagers who staff these places, would have a way to get there, so that there's a certain inclusion there. But to me, as an advocate, a statewide advocate, here's the biggest justification. The Ocean Bay Parkway Greenway is a state-built facility, state paid for, state taxes, state maintained. Citizens of Nassau County have a land-based mainland access via Cedar Creek Park. They can, without a car, they can just ride right onto the Ocean Bay Parkway and enjoy. Suffolk County residents either have to drive to Captree and pay $8, or they have to drive all the way to Wantaw. And so there is no access by land. This Great South Bay Greenway would utilize a park, Gardner Park, that is almost identical in terms of location and style and access to Cedar Creek Park. So we're not sure why the state has been so opposed to this when I have so much legislative support for it. And I'm not sure what to do at this point.
Is that, I may have this backwards because I may be mixing it up with something else, but isn't the issue with the evacuation lane over either a bridge or a causeway?
Yeah, but there are 3 lanes going north and 2 lanes going south. So the evacuation is that third lane. The plan
Right.
would turn that third lane into a bike path, but would the plan that has already been in some ways, preliminarily drawn up, would require that northbound lane be convertible, be something that, in God forbid, in a case where you had to evacuate a mass amount of people from the beach, it would be usable. But most of the time when there's a storm of that magnitude that you are going to have to evacuate, people know long before. But obviously we wouldn't think of this project at all if we felt it would jeopardize safety. So that third lane would be convertible.
Right. So let me just say, first of all, we have this, this will be part of the record of this meeting, but beyond that, when we do hear specifics like this, we tend to bring them back to our member agencies and
Please.
and talk further about it. I can't guarantee anything, obviously, but we definitely make the effort to bring it back. I remember it came up several years ago. And I think it was in the context of a funding request.
Yeah, and as I said before, it's one of these things where there's bipartisan support for both state senators from that area, Week and Martinez, are all in favor of this, and they
Right.
did write letters on my behalf to DOT, and Assemblyman Durso also. And I think would be something that would create a loop from Cedar Creek Park. It would be something that would be a tourist attraction. It would be something that where people would, from New York City, would take their bikes to the beach via the Long Island Railroad instead of taking their cars. Just because, Robert Moses said that everything's going to be by the car, well, 100 years later, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm kind of passionate about this. And the new county executive, Ed Romaine,
Ed Romaine, right.
is as supportive as Steve Ballone was. So yeah, a couple of years ago we had this big press conference, and I spoke at the press conference, and it was a press conference to announce the plan, but then DOT has put the kibosh on it. In response to those letters that I had generated, DOT sent me and the other people, the elected officials, a letter saying that it would jeopardize the safety of the outbound lane, blah, 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 we're not doing it. And it just seemed very conclusive, and not, it was a way for them to look to not do it instead of look to do it. So, and I would imagine there's federal funding that could be used for this, but as I said before, Nassau County residents and Suffolk County residents are both state taxpayers, and Nassau County residents have access to this trail, and Suffolk County residents don't, and it's just not equitable.
Got it. So do you recall who the letter was from that you received?
It was from the head of DOT.
The commissioner.
If you can I give you my contact information and
Sure.
then I'll forward you the letter?
Actually, you can just throw it in the chat pod and we'll pick it up.
Throw it in the what?
The chat pod?
Right now I'm traveling and I'm away from my computer.
Okay.
It wouldn't be until Friday. So how would I do that?
Okay, so I'll give you my phone number and you can give me a call. 347.
Hold it. All right, go on with the meeting. Let me get a pen and
Sure.
And I missed at the beginning. Who am I speaking to? I thought this
I'm
was
sorry.
gonna be a big meeting, and I'm so glad that it's not, and that you gave me such breath to talk about this. And
Well, if it were up to us, it would be a big meeting. So don't thank us.
no, I was supposed to go to the 4:30 meeting. Obviously, there wasn't a 4:30. The post I got said I thought there was a meeting at 3 and at 4:30. I didn't realize the meeting was from 3 to 4:30.
Yeah, it's 3 to 4:30, right?
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Jerry Bogas. I'm an assistant director with the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council.
Could you spell that?
Yeah, I hope so. B-O-G as a girl.
B-O-G.
B-O-G-A, C as in cat, Z as in zebra.
Bogach.
Yep.
Okay.
And my number is 347-633-3207.
Now, is that a textable number or is that a?
Yeah, that's a mobile. Oh, it's a cell. Yeah. So
Okay,
you can
great.
text.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I've said my piece about this, but the success of the North Shore Rail Trail, the success of the Ocean Bay Parkway, it just seems that people are now more receptive to this. And then I have one more minute for another project.
Go for it.
The Long Island Greenway. You've heard of that one, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I sort of act as a liaison between Trust for Public Land and elected officials, and just groups like you and everything else. So I'm just here full-heartedly endorsing the Long Island Greenway, and that if the contact person at Trust for Public Land is Danny Gold and Mike Lieberman, and that NYMTC should always be in some way looking to help on that, because they just got to raise grant. There's all kinds of money for this, and it needs to happen. The Empire State Trail is a wonderful thing. It goes from New York to Canada and Albany to Buffalo, but it skips 5 million people who live on, on Long Island. So we're desperately trying to get this going. And Danny said that the first section, Eisenhower Park to Brentwood, it will be shovel ready at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. But we need all the cooperation we can get.
So you'll be happy to know that we did, in fact, your organization, the Trust for Public Land requested a letter of plan consistency for that raise grant, and we provided it. So
That sounds good.
yeah.
I'm just trying to do my job here as the bike guy. So
Yep, understood.
that's
Okay,
great.
we only got two more things to cover, and then I
Okay.
think we're pretty much done. And this is great. It's great to have a small meeting like this. You get a lot of information. So, with Stephanie, are these the last two questions here coming up?
I believe we're nearing the end. Yes.
Okay, right, so-
we do have a couple more. I think we have the other section, but
Let's go to the last
possibly-
topic, actually. If we
Yeah.
could.
The policy and program development. So you want me to keep going forward?
Keep
Pat,
going,
to
yeah.
that?
Keep going.
Sure. Okay. Second. There we go.
Right. So this is sort of the forward-looking part of the discussion we had earlier with the larger group, which is, how do you how do you plan for active mobility planning? In other words, how does this become integrated more fully into the planning process? We touched a little bit on this, Dan, earlier, but and then, since there's so many actors involved, and Dan, you certainly know this from the Route 9 experience. How do you facilitate collaboration between the municipalities and the counties and the state and the region and whatever? Any thoughts, including transit agencies? Any thoughts on that in terms of what you would suggest is a good way to approach integrating active transportation more fully into the planning process?
I think that probably need to be proactive in pulling such subject matter experts into the process.
Okay.
We're all busy and, we're all, largely volunteers in this universe of,
Yep.
unfortunately, because of where we are. So might need a little more, direct involvement or, nudging to get people involved in the process. But just, for, but also a lot of, that's for people who know and places that know, but like there are folks, there are plenty of communities that don't have, folks like Martin or myself kind of, or, other local activists working on this stuff.
Right.
But this is, I think there's a broader interest in walkability and bikeability, but I think a lot of folks are just like, they don't know what to do or how to do it. And it really shouldn't be on the locals to figure this out and to advocate for it. It's, you don't have local residents like banging down the door to widen 287. That's the DOT has an idea, they go ahead, they do it, and they make it happen. And I think that probably the most important thing is to bring subject matter experts and put them in positions of power in the DOT. That's probably what really needs to happen.
Okay.
It's like holding a bake sale, for the military kind of thing. It's like we hold the bake sales for the schools because the local people want to do it, but it's like the folks who have the big money and power, like they're not thinking about this. And if they do, it's just like oh, well, we're building this road, we'll put in a little painted bike lane and we did our part for, active transportation. it needs to be,
Yeah,
and even with, I'm sorry, let me just finish one thing. Like the Tappan Zee Bridge, amazing project. The walkway bikeway is amazing, but then on the end here in Tarrytown, you're going through a pedestrian plaza.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no like cohesive connection, and they tell you to walk your bike. It's like, what? Like, there, so it's like, yeah, anyway.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. Martin, you want to add to that?
yeah. The frustration uh, for me as an activist is after getting all this popular support for this plan, to be told by an unelected official, no, and to say that he said, no, and then the project's dead. So that there's so much power that they wield to change people's lives, yet there's no accountability. Like I can't, get involved in a campaign to unseat him or her. So that it seems to me very undemocratic. There are a tremendous amount of people who would be lives would be enhanced by the Long Island Greenway and the Great South Bay Greenway, and they have no voice. I mean, I'm a voice, but when this unelected official tells you that he's just not interested, then it just seems that there's a certain autocracy in that.
Got it. Okay. It sounds like one other thing, if I could just interpret what you're both saying a little bit more. Um, it sounds like resources available at the local level are not what they should be to do this work. Would you, I mean, again, you're mostly volunteers. The local municipalities don't often have traffic engineers, much less, active transportation planners. It would seem that there's a real deficit of resources at the local level to even consider these things. Is that something that is that a conclusion I can reach from what you've been saying?
Yes, that
Yeah, I mean that's they're kind of that is a good conclusion, but I don't know if that's what I think that's another valid point, but not necessarily what I was getting at.
Okay.
But you're
Okay.
right, because even when our village wants to hire a transportation consultant, and we have retained a consultant to deal with walkability projects that we're doing here in Sleepy Hollow, the transportation engineering profession is such a cult of level of service, and it's hard to find professionals that know what they're doing in active transportation. So not only is like the municipalities don't have subject matter experts, and often there are, locally, there are people like myself in each of the villages. There are people kind of like myself that want to, that have some idea of how to do this stuff, but we're not empowered to do it. We're not professionals, and when we do get, like Irvington hired a traffic engineer to analyze what they need to do for the Route 9 project, but they're coming at it from someone who drives. They're the person making those analysis is a driver who is focusing on level of service and does not have. It's like I think probably the number one overall arching problem is just that people, the majority of people, residents and elected officials and public officials are, for lack of a better term, car brained. It's just there. Or have you heard the term motor normativity?
Not really.
Oh yeah, basically it's just we're so immersed in motor vehicles everywhere,
Right.
and we just assume that's normal, and that's the way to do things, and that's how things operate, that we can't even see outside of that perspective, and to realize like there'll be a car blocking, they'll just park, their car like on the sidewalk, they'll park in the curb cut, the park in the crosswalk, people just aren't thinking outside of their personal like motor vehicle needs. And that on a personal level, and then on the policy level, it's just there's like breaking outside of this, like, I don't know what the right word is, but
Right.
you think you know what I'm getting at.
This mindset, yes. Well, it's more than mindset, but it's a
Yeah.
culture almost.
Yeah.
Martin, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that I was just about to type it in the chat. That being pro bike pedestrian, vulnerable road user does not have to mean that you are anti-car. And people look at it as a zero sum game. That any gain for bikes and micromobility means a loss for cars. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yep.
Yep.
So like in New York City, where they moved the parking a few feet away from the curb and then they put in a bike lane, it's still parking. It just means that it's now much more sensible.
Right.
So it doesn't, and also, I've ridden my bike all over the world and all over the United States. And every urban planner in the US needs to go to Europe and Japan and other places and see how they do it. Because they, in Denmark and Holland, they didn't decide all of a sudden, hey, we want to ride our bikes in the middle of the winter. They were, with the automobile revolution post-war, they realized this can't happen. We don't have the infrastructure. And luckily, those countries were not built for the car. They were built in the 13th century. So it gives them a reason to not be in favor of the car. But I like that term, motor normative activity, is that Americans don't think of any other way. But I've also ridden all over in the U.S. And last year I took a solo ride from Houston to Jacksonville. And one thing I got to tell you is I went over 23 bridges and causeways, and every last one had a bike path to get over it. So I'm not sure the middle of Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and Florida, there were bike lanes over causeways. So it was depressing to come back to New York and realize that that's such a barrier.
An interesting point. I
Um,
wanted to give, actually, just by way of closing, I wanted to give Dan Sirachi a chance to ask any question that we haven't covered yet. So Dan, is there anything that you wanted to ask our two guests?
Hey, well, first and foremost, Dan and Marty, it's great to hear your voices. I hope you guys are both doing all right. And I apologize. Jerry knows this, but I'm sort of half listening and half putting my kids to bed right now. So really appreciate your comments. Dan, you're right on the money. We've talked about this before with level of service. And the good news is that my team and I are part of the larger team that's working on NYSDOT's active transportation plan right now. And part of that effort is to look at design standards and make some tweaks to incorporate more active transportation elements. So my hope is, you're going to see some level of change to level of service. I can't guarantee that though, because we're still very early in that process. And then Marty, thank you for all of your comments. I'm really intrigued. I hadn't heard about the first project you mentioned. Obviously, with the Long Island Greenway, we're intimately involved in that.
Right.
And, we're working very closely with NYMTC on this plan. So you can rest assured it will be a reference point.
Yeah. The Long Island Greenway seems to be much better funded, organized, whatever. But the same could happen for this Great South Bay Greenway if DOT would just yield a little bit. No pun intended. But so I'm gonna text Jerry and give him email him the letter that I got, that all of our legislative people who I had write on my behalf.
Perfect. And yeah,
we'll see-
Marty, if you have like a project description, by all means, please feel free to shoot it my direction. You know, one of the, I don't think you were on when Jerry covered this, but you know, this afternoon, we did sort of a wide poll of, you know, where are those big active transportation needs, like the big picture longitudinal trails or active transportation projects in your region. And that certainly sounds like something we should investigate. So
Yeah,
please do send us that information.
there's something also that Balone and Jonathan Keys had put together called the Suffolk County Hike Bike Master Plan. So that identified by way of like almost a computer score based on economic need, accessibility, destinations such as public transit, universities, libraries, things like that, and gave every sort of route on Long Island a priority score. So that's
I'm
also
pretty sure
some-
that was NYMTC funded, wasn't it, Jerry?
Yeah, it was. It's an interesting example of, I'm glad you brought it up. It's an interesting example of, you know, it is true that Suffolk County was doing that in the context of the regional planning process, but they were able to draw upon federal dollars through NYMTC to actually do the thing, you know. So it's
Yeah,
how
it's a
this
great-
process should work in so many ways.
it's a great resource if anybody would just use it. So that's another thing to think about. I mean, I went to half a dozen meetings on that. So and it was fun, you know, people saying, oh, you know, this should get this score. And but so I'll send on that information. And Dan, nice to talk to you and put your kids to bed. And the rest, Jerry, I guess you can take you know, this meeting was supposed to go at 8:30, but I've said what I need to say, and that's
Well, I
good.
just wanted to say, I guess in closing, that this isn't go the way we plan. But sometimes the better things happen when you don't go the way we plan. And certainly we appreciate your time and your thoughts because you filled in a lot of gaps for us tonight. So
And
Okay.
let me follow up
Right.
on what Dan Sirachi was saying with design
Sure.
standards,
Sure.
because it brought something to mind that I didn't think of to mention.
go for it.
So the New York State Highway Design Manual has active transportation elements, cycling elements in it, but they're all like geared towards vehicular cyclists. They need to redo their standards with the target audience of being an 8-year-old kid trying to go to school, or with, you know, a mother trying to go to the grocery store. You know, people who are not like hardcore cyclists like myself. So that needs to be the target audience of the cycling elements in the state's design manual. That's one. Then two, also in the state design manual, in order to make these things happen here on Route 9 or other state roads and just in general, the Department of Transportation, again, with their motor vehicle mindset, their lane width standards are problematic. They're like, we need 12 feet, 13 feet, whatever. And it's hindering projects here now that they will not move off of those standards, even though the AASHTO guidelines specifically say you can, you know, in a local setting like Route 9, you can go down to 10 feet, 9 feet if you have to, you know, which is not great, 9 feet, but 10 feet is plenty, you know, 11 feet. You know, it's like they need to work on changing those standards so you can have more flexibility, because we have a 40-foot roadway here on Route 9. That's plenty of room to have motor vehicles, cycling, and walking, you know, facilities for everybody, protected, safe, and it'll make it actually safer for driving, and safer for everybody if we move off the 12-foot or, you know, standard. So I think that we need to push the DOT to update their design manuals, and so that's that part. And then also probably one way to kind of change the whole motor vehicle Uber alles mindset and to have public officials, that work in the Department of Transportation to realize what is possible is to, like, Mr. Buckman was saying, is like pay for every single Department of Transportation traffic engineer and department head and whatever, send them to the Netherlands on a trip. And I'm not joking. There is an organization in Netherlands, the Cycling Embassy. That's their job. They take people on tours and show them how you can design facilities that are amazing and works for everybody and makes a better, like go to Utrecht. They took their arterial highway, local arterial road, that's like their inner ring road, and they converted it from, a 2-lane arterial into 1 lane, and it's carrying the same number of people in motor vehicles, but safer, and just they focused on flow instead of like massively wide roadway.
I rode through Utrecht in 2015.
Yeah, and it's changed since then. Even there,
Yeah.
like
What
I
was that-
visited in 2022, and I went through this intersection. I'm like, oh, this spot is horrible. This road is ridiculous. And then, like a month later, they happened to start construction on that spot that I said was horrible. And they,
What was the saying that I have a pen now? What was the saying that you said before that I wanted to copy? You said
we need to make the safe thing to do be the easiest thing
easy
to do.
thing to do. All right.
Yeah.
And proper design leads to proper usage. All right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
But I'm not joking about, like, we need to get the transportation officials to go to the Netherlands and see how to design a safe transportation system.
Or
Hey, Dan, on that point, I wonder if that embassy has does that virtually in any way.
They might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same effect, but it's better than nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And then, the one last thing I had on my head was, again, Netherlands as the example, is there. They have the rail operator has bike share system at every train station, and it's integrated in the transit app, in the bike share app. They're one app, and your transit card pays for your bike share, and it's at every station, so you can get to your destination, and you can go. I'm going to visit my dad in South Orange. You get out, you pop on the bike, and you go to their house, or you go into a meeting or whatever, or and if you're at home, you bike to the train station. It's amazing, and so you rent it, and it's yours for the day, and you don't have to worry about someone, because a lot of the bike shares around here, at least when they're doing Lime and the Dockless bike share, it's like once you put the bike down, someone else can get it, and it's then like I get back from my dad's house to the train station, my bike is gone.
Right.
So
They have what you're describing, Dan, is mobility as a service, and
yes,
actually Pittsburgh Move PGH is a system that they're piloting, that where they've integrated the transit fares with bike share, with ride share, the whole 9 yards. And we have started to look at that in the region. Of course, our region is so fragmented that it's difficult to bring all the agencies together, but it would be something to have something like that. It would be great.
Yeah, and of course you need safe infrastructure for people to feel comfortable doing that.
Sure.
It's like a whole systematic change, but I think that that's something we need to think about in the long term, is providing integrated system.
That's a great point. Great point.
Yeah, and also I guess one of my other fantasies outside of active transportation is that we have this tremendous rail network, and it's so underutilized. And we have the most transit ridership in the United States, but you go like in Utrecht. I was there on a Friday night at 8:00 p.m. and they had 40 trains on the board in like 45 minutes. And
trains.
like we should be able to walk out of my house here in Sleepy Hollow, go to the Tarrytown train station, and there should be a train every 10 minutes.
When you were in Utrecht, did you go to the Transportation Museum?
I did not.
The train museum? It-
Yeah, no, I didn't go there.
it was-
I went by it, but I didn't go in.
It was amazing. It was a kind of a cross between it's the Smithsonian met Disneyland. Like they had these incredible immersive rides, and it was
Oh,
one
cool.
of the best museums I've been to. But anyway, that's off the point.
Yeah, but
No,
just
it's
in
just-
general for like the long-term transportation plan, it's like I think we need to move to like to RER type service for our commuter lines instead of like making them, you know, especially New Jersey Transit, like all the push-pull nonsense. And you know, it's like electrify as much as possible, more train service, and move to like a proof of payment system instead of conductors. Use the conductors to do something more useful, like spread them out, like one conductor train, or you know, one conductor every 2 trains to, you know, instead of having to try to lift a ticket from everybody, use the staff better and run more trains, lighter trains and faster trains and just better like frequent service. Because we, even though we have the most transit ridership in the United States, we could easily double, triple, quadruple that.
Well, we're certainly hearing about how to make the commuter lines more integrated. That's for sure. With that, I think we're pretty much at the end of the evening. If anyone needs AICP credit, Stephanie has put up how to do that. I'm not sure either one of you are on for AICP credit, but just in case.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay. Well, you can get it if you.
My motivations are pure. I'm not here for credit.
Yeah, this is continuing education requirements.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Good.
All right, so no, we very much appreciate your time tonight and your thoughts. Very educational and incredibly nuanced, and a better outcome than if we had 30 people on the phone. So we appreciate it.
Great. Worked for me.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
All
you
right,
so much
great.
for your time.
Yeah. Thank
I'll
you.
be in touch.
Good night.
Thanks to my
All right.
colleagues. Take care, everybody.
Bye bye.
Good night.